And for that reason, children, you must know that English East India Company, they became quite enthusiastic to come to India, and instead of trade and commerce, not instead of trade and commerce, because they had just continued their trade and commerce for a long period of time. But apart from all these things, we have just come to know that they were also very much interested to just grow the crops in India that could be just commercialized directly from India to the other provinces. Okay, so the key points from this topic we have just come to know that whether it could be the permanent settlement, it could be the Mahalwari settlement or the Rathwari settlement, the English East India Company, every time they got just benefited as because they were just modifying their land settlement systems which could be best for them. They were trying which could be best for business, so that's why they were just looking forward for that. Whenever the Ijardari settlement of Warren Hastings here introduced to just eradicate all the drawbacks from their 10-year settlement or the Hasala system or the Doshala Bandobasta was introduced later on permanent settlement. So just like that, as it was such a continuous process that had been just going on in our country. Now we're just going to look another important topic, that is the commercialization of agriculture. Commercialization of agriculture, whenever the term or the word agriculture, it comes in our mind, we think that the paddy, different type of sheep corn, and vegetables, and few that is fruits and all these things. But apart from all these things, children, do you know few things are there that cannot be just eaten? We the people, we cannot just eat all those things, and that if these all are having a very great demand outside of our country, that could be easily sold out to the outside of the country, that could be exported, and from where a huge amount of foreign currency can be just earned. Yes, exactly, the British, they had found the soil of our country, it was quite suitable for the production of few commercial crops, or the commercial crops like tea, indigo, coffee. Though coffee and tea, it can be just drunk, as because we can just drink all these all are the beverage crops of our country. But still, tea, coffee, such as cotton and jute, all these, indigo most importantly. So indigo, jute, and another thing I told, that was cotton. These were very important, and there was a very great demand of all these commercial crops outside of India. So that's why the English East India Company, they sought to think that from here they will just put a pressure upon the Indian peasants or the farmers to just cultivate all these things. They will just pay a very little amount of money to the poor farmers, as because they are very uneducated. They don't know that which crops are very important for them, which crops cultivating which crops can be very much lucrative for them. They did not know all these facts very well. So that's why the English East India Company, they had started pressurizing all the Indian peasants or the poor farmers to just cultivate all these things, all these crops. So these crops are known as the commercial crops of India, such as tea, indigo, jute, rubber, cotton, and so on. What has happened? Suppose, for instance, take a look that in east part of our country, East Bengal, where the peasants, they were not very much enthusiastic to just cultivate indigo. But when the indigo cultivators, they just came to India in the late 18th century, they were not having any right to just purchase a land for the cultivation of indigo. But in the year of 1829, perhaps the land right was given to the indigo cultivators. They could just purchase and sell out the land that belonged to them. Even they had started to just monopolize the business on these commercial crops. They had started pressurize upon the indigo planters, indigo cultivators. The indigo planters, those who had just come from abroad, those who had just come from Britain, they had given a proposal to the indigo cultivators that you can just take advance payment, and the payment towards the indigo cultivation that was given for the cultivation of indigo, that was known as Dadan, D-A-D-A-N. I just repeat, D-A-D-A-N, Dadan. This was called an advance payment system that was given by the indigo planters, the Britishers. They had just given it away to the Indian cultivators, Suppose, for instance, take a look, I'm just giving an explanation, just listen carefully. They had just given 50 rupees to Ram. Suppose you think that Ram is an indigo cultivator and he has taken 50 rupees as a debt, or not a debt but as an advance payment of a British indigo planter. The indigo planter, he had just given the assurance to that particular person, means Ram, that if once you just complete your cultivation, then you will just get all your money. So means getting this kind of assurance, he had started to cultivate the land. But and for that reason, suppose when the cultivation process was going on, suppose it seemed to be the cultivator that 20 more rupees are needed for him for the cultivation of indigo. For that reason, he went to the house of the money lenders, as because you know that the money lenders, they were associated to just give away the money to the poor peasants on a high interest. So this, they just easily got the money from the money lender. But what has happened, once he had just accomplished his cultivation, when the cultivation process was fully completed, and whenever the time had just appeared to just give away the payment to the indigo cultivator, as because the indigo planter, now he will just give the money or the rest payment to the indigo cultivator, and the indigo cultivator, instead, he will just give away all his crops to the indigo planter. But what it was done, when he had just collected the money, when he had just taken the money from the indigo planter, at the time an assignment was done, means a contract was done, and where he had to just give his thumbs up, as because he were absolutely illiterate, the poor farmers were absolutely illiterate, so that's why they had nothing to do, they couldn't just read the terms and conditions. So instead of 50, suppose it was written 500, they also couldn't just know about that. So when the time appeared, the indigo planter, he came, he had just seized all the cotton or the jute, everything, or the indigo, he had just seized, confiscated all the crops from him, and whenever he was asked to just give the rest price or the rest amount, he clearly declared, showing the document, that I have already given 500 rupees to you. Now as because the poor farmer, he was in trap, means he never just knew that this kind of controversy was going on. This was such a conspiracy that was done by the indigo planter, and what has happened, the money lender, those who had just lended his money as a very high tax or a very high interest, he will also just means gain his money, he will also just come to means collect his money. Whenever he will just not get it, he will seize the entire land that was just given to, that was under the governance of that particular zamindar, I mean not zamindar, the poor peasant. So in this way, the poor peasants, after a very short period of time, in the mid of the 19th century, in this way, the in the peasantry society, there were the class division. Yes, in the peasantry society, the class division became very much prominent at the time, in which way the class or the we had just segregated the class of the poor peasants, or the means the poor farmers. Let's have a look. Where in the provinces the permanent settlement was not introduced, in those provinces it was same that the irrigation system became very much effective, and for irrigation system, the rich farmers were associated with this irrigation system, or the water flowing system, or the canals. So in the irrigation system, those who were the owner of the irrigation system, I mean the rich farmers, though, who did not go to the field for the cultivation directly, but amid all these things, they had just recruited a few peasants as a tenants. Tenants means here bharate proja. Okay, children. So when they was just recruited, they were just appointed for the cultivation of crops. They had to provide, means after a very hard toil, they could only get only the wage after the day. It could be 5 rupees or 10 rupees. Just for instance, I'm saying, don't just write it inside your answer that it was 5 rupees or 10 rupees. I'm just for asking only for your better understanding. Okay, so they were also peasants, so they were very means poor peasants. They were the most downtrodden class of the society, whereas the irrigation system was absolutely under the control of the rich peasants. So in this case, we have just come to know 3 different groups of the peasantry society. We can just signify, we can just segregate the peasantry society or the peasantry groups in 3 different categories, such as the rich peasants, those were very closely linked up with the English East India Company. Number two, they were the middlemen, or the means middle class peasants. Those who were directly associated with the lands. They were having few lands. The lands were assigned with them, as because they could just provide the taxes or the revenue to the English East India Company at the correct time. And the third one, they were the worst sufferers of the peasantry society. We shall not just call the peasantry groups, means the third one, the peasantry groups, as the peasants. Instead we can just call it the tenants, as because they had to just work very hard, or somehow they had just taken the land from their landlords as a rent, as a lease, and on that basis they had started cultivation over there. Once they were not just means they were not capable to just continue to just give away their taxes or the means revenue to the landlords or the upper class peoples. Their means right was just taken over away. In this way, so many peasants were there. They had just left, they had just escaped, they fled away from their own territory to the other provinces, as because nothing to do with them, as because this was absolutely an injustice or the illegal means activity that was just continuously going on during this British period. Even the post-colonial period also, this was also continuing. But the peasants are the most important asset of the society, as for I know. I just means think so that as because the peasants, they are the assets, because India, I have already told you in my video that India is still having an agro-based economy. India is still having the agricultural based economy. So that's why we should not just neglect, we should not just exploit or extort or torment the poor peasants, as because means depending upon them we are just going on, we have been just continuing our livelihood. So that's why this is the means correct time to just see, to just look after their grievances, their plights also. Okay, so what was happening, we were discussing about the commercialization of agriculture. So instead of the cultivation of paddy and different types of food grains and vegetables, the English East India Company intentionally, deliberately, they had started pressurizing upon the common peasants or the poor farmers to just cultivate the means of commercial crops such as tea, it could be coffee, it could be jute, indigo, cotton, jute, and all these things. So that's why they sort of think that if they could export all these commercial crops to the other countries, they could just gain the means of foreign currencies. And for that reason, whenever they had started to just follow this policy, the Indian peasants, the situation was absolutely, means what can, in which sentence, by what sentence I can just give the explanation, I can just compare with the situation. I don't have any words to just explain or to just say anything about the poor peasants and their situation at the current their contemporary economic condition. What can be happened is because the political association or the political organizations of India during that time were not very much organized before 1857. So who will just speak, who will just means say something, who will be very much vocal, who will just raise their voice against this kind of injustice? No one, no newspaper, nothing. They had just stood beside the poor peasants. But after 1800, most importantly, yes, when the printing revolution was already done since 1780, few newspapers, they had just stood, they had just taken a part in promoting to just write down, to reveal the facts of the poor peasants, what was just going to happen to them. Even we have come to know that the Peasants Revolt or the uprisings or the rebellion became very much common during that time. One of the most important revolts of this time was the Indigo Revolt. Yes, exactly. Yes, because we're just going to discuss about the indigo cultivation. So Indigo Rebellion was also very much prominent. You know, children, the Indigo Rebellion that broke out in India, especially in Bengal, Nadia, Krishnagar, Chowgacha, in present Bangladesh. Faridpur is also there in the year of 1859. It lasted for 1 year. It was in the year of 1860 when the Indigo Commission was set up. A compromise was done between the English East India Company and the indigo cultivators. So since that time, it was clearly stated that the indigo cultivators wouldn't be just means pressurized by the indigo planters. They cannot just force the indigo cultivators to just cultivate. If they are just if they think to just cultivate indigo at the time, this is absolutely their own wish, they can just do so. Otherwise, the indigo cultivators won't be just pressurized to just cultivate that. Okay, this was the fact. In the year of 1859, when the Indigo Revolt it just broke out, that was a serious fact for the peasant movement and in India, as because in earlier you have just come to know that in 1855 the Santal rebellion broke out. The two prominent leaders of the Santal rebellion, Sidhu Kanu, Chad and Vaira, were also there. Okay, so whenever I have just talked about the Indigo Rebellion that just broke out in the year of 1859, lasted for 1864, 1 year. So two prominent leaders of the Indigo Rebellion were Digambar Biswas and Vishnu Charan Biswas. Digambar Biswas and Vishnu Charan Biswas, they had just played a very active role in promoting the harmony amongst the indigo cultivators, and indigo cultivators they had just fought against the British injustices, because this could not be just happen. This was absolutely not done. What's the path they were just following? So that's why the Indigo Rebellion, though it had been, what's the outcome means, obviously it was a failure, as because the British they had just ruthlessly suppressed the revolt or the rebellion. Finally, what has happened in this Indigo Rebellion, after Indigo Revolt, was the most important outcome, as because at least the British, they were convinced to just to just create a law for the poor indigo peasants. Indigo Commission was set up, and the responsibility or the task of the Indigo Commission to just look after that whether the indigo cultivators are willing to just cultivate indigo or not. If they are not interested, don't just put any pressure upon them. So at least this was done. So for today, up to this, so the topics we have discussed till now, that are permanent settlement. I'm just going to repeat once again, that are the permanent settlements. In my next previous video, I have just taught you the permanent settlement. Next today in this video, I have taught you the commercialization of agriculture. I've also taught the Bratwari settlement of 1820. I have also taught Mahalwari settlement of 1833. Now children, one important announcement: if you're having any problem, any question, any query, any doubt regarding this class, you may just write down your query in the comment section. You please just go to the comment section, just write what you want to know from me. If any further explanation is needed, you please just text it in your group, or you may just write it inside the comment section. If you just like the video, if you want to follow this video, then go to my YouTube channel and just subscribe the channel. Just click on the bell icon to just get all notifications for the future reference, so that you will just come to know all my important videos, what will be uploaded regularly or periodically. And share the videos with all your friends, those who are not the WhatsApp group, or if somehow if they have just left, they have just aborted from this group, or they just left this group, you just share the videos with them. Till then, stay safe, stay home. Thank you. Goodbye.